Okay. Okay. Hello, I'm Matthew T. Martin, and welcome to my new podcast slash talking show, Talk Tonight. So, this show is something that I've been meaning to do for a very long time. In fact, the basis behind the show is kind of why I started this channel and any other channel that I've ever done on YouTube, and actually going even further than that, any real artistic project that I have ever put out has been for the reason that I'm starting this show. Um, I've never made it any secret, or at least I've never tried to make it any secret that I suffer from very severe depression and PTSD. Uh, I've suffered from this disease since I was very young, and it's impacted my life and my work in ways that are beyond explanation, or I couldn't put it into words. It's been a big thing that looms over my life for a long time. Um, I struggled with it and got to a point where I am now today where I can manage it, and I've been happy for a good time, and very it's somewhere I didn't think I'd ever be. And looking back on it, I remember when I went through all this and how alone I felt. And I decided that I never wanted anyone else to feel like this or anything like that ever again. If I could do anything to try and prevent that, if I could reach out and communicate with anyone, just let them know that the feelings that they felt were normal, that no one goes through anything alone. There's always someone out there who can understand, who can relate. That's what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be there for those people because I didn't have anyone there for me. I didn't reach out. I isolated myself, and it was the stupidest thing I've ever done. Um, I don't want anyone else to have to go through that because I went through some things that will forever haunt me, and I don't think that I should have. Like, I think that if I had reached out, if I had just known that there was someone out there and that my feelings weren't as far out there and untangible as I thought at the time, they would never have gotten to the point where they got. Um, Now, I do want to put out some disclaimers that, first of all, this is completely unscripted. I didn't write any of this down, which is why my words may be a little bit grasping and not as coherent as they usually are. As such, anything that's expressed in here is from my head. It's all opinion. There's no facts. It's not scripted. So I'm not a licensed therapist or psychologist. I was a psychology major in community college for a little while, but I dropped out of that because it wasn't going for me. Um, so take what I say with a grain of salt and just realize that um, what I'm saying isn't therapeutic advice. It's just straight from the heart, and it's just a way of talking. Because I think that that is the most important thing in this world. The most important ability we have is to talk. And there are certain things out there that we don't talk about. And I think it's time that we start. So, the purpose of this episode, this very first inaugural episode of Talk Tonight, just thought it would be a good idea if I opened up personally and talked a bit about my past and what I've gone through. I think that will give us a good foundation for future episodes where I want you guys to understand more about me and what I went through so that I have more credit to talking in the future episodes where I want this podcast to be a place where I tackle all kinds of social issues and mental health issues and just talk about things. That's basically the entire premise of this show and what I want to do with it. This has been on my mind for many years. I've always wanted to do something like this. It's just it's been daunting to me, very intimidating. Um, oof, very nervous right now, but I've don't worry. I thought very long and hard about this, and I've decided this is something I want to do. Um, it's I'm not opposed to talking about my past, as which is actually something that most people don't seem to realize. I think that it's healthy to be able to talk about things that happen to you. I don't think that you should put yourself out there for everyone. The only reason that I feel comfortable doing so is because I'm not phased by what other people say or think of me. I'm very confident in who I am. That's a personal struggle that it took me years to get to that place. Um, so I wouldn't recommend that to everyone, but for your close friends and family, I think it's very important that you maintain some type of transparency, especially if you're going through these issues. You need to be able to talk to someone, um, even if it's just one person. Like preferably, you shouldn't ever try it. You shouldn't put all this on one person. You shouldn't keep it all to yourself either, because you are a person. Um, I believe transparency is one of the most important values that you can exhibit. And when I started getting better from my depression, transparency is the thing that alleviated the most of the weight and pain that I had been carrying. Just talking and getting it all out there. That's why, since I got better, I've tried to maintain transparency with not just those closest to me, but just anyone who asks anything of me. Anytime I've gone through anything, I try and get it all out there, be as honest as I can with myself and everyone else. Because if I don't keep it to myself and I put it out there, then that's something else that I don't have to worry about today. And just not having that pressure is so helpful. Just and it helps you understand how you're feeling. Because when you keep it all to yourself, things snowball and they become much, in a sense, much realer than they actually are. Um, Things that seem unsurmountable, when you start talking about them, you can realize that maybe they weren't that bad. Maybe there is an actual solution. There's a way to get through anything. And I honestly do believe that no matter what you're going through, even if it's something that's beyond your control, something that seems so impossible to get around, to get through. And I've had tons of these pop up in my life, things that you just can't control. I don't think that anything signals the end. I don't think there's anything that you can't get past. You can't find a way to live around. Because living is the most important decision that you can make in your life, and it is a decision. And personally, I think that once you decide that you want to live, you don't let anything stop you. You live no matter what. That's a decision that I made that has kept me going through the toughest things, things that I didn't think I would be able to make it through at the time, but because I made that decision, because I made that promise, I've been able to go to get through it. Now, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself a little. So to give some background, when I was young, depression, I wasn't born with depression. It was something that kind of awoken in me later on. I don't know exactly what caused it or why. For me, I always viewed depression as a disease because it helps you to differentiate from yourself. Because a lot of times with depression, it's a very personal thing. It comes from within you. It's like a voice whispering all the bad things in your head. And if you accept that as part of you, and you don't differentiate, it makes it much harder to fight. That's something I found personally. Um, you want to be able to say, This is depression. This is the disease. This is not me. These thoughts are not me. They're coming from somewhere else, somewhere foreign. That type of rationalization, I think, helps immensely. And it's not your fault. Depression is never anyone's fault. It's a chemical imbalance in your head that causes these feelings of inadequacy, these feelings of doubt and sadness and anger and that darkness. It's not you. It's not your fault. It's science. It's unfortunately it's something that that happens since the human brain is not perfect. And sometimes these ailments, they affect you more than you know. And it's not your fault. I blamed myself when I was a kid for the longest time for having these feelings that no one else felt, looking around and feeling I was less than, like I wasn't worth anything because I had these feelings and these thoughts that no one else had. And then I'd kick myself because I was like, well, look at all these people have it worse. Why am I upset? Because I mean, not I've been through some things, but nothing nearly as bad as these people. And that feeling of being sad without reason, it drove me to lengths that I really shouldn't have, because you can't compare trauma. You can't compare depression or try and explain it away. It doesn't matter. If you feel things regardless of the reason. You can't try and pawn it off on, well, it doesn't, I shouldn't feel this way because that's not, I haven't been through something nearly as bad as this person. That doesn't matter because you feel that way. At the end of the day, you still feel that way, no matter what reasoning there is behind it. And you have to address that before anything else. You don't worry about why you feel the way things that you feel. Just accept that you feel them and then go from there. Um, expect a lot of tangents in these episodes because, like I said, I am talking from the heart and from the mind, and I tend to ramble. That's kind of what I do. I'm the rambling man. Um, so when I was a kid, I was fine. I didn't have depression. I was born to a teenage mom. She's the most important person in my life. She always has been. She's the strongest individual I know, and I love her to death. Like she's the one person who I know will be there for me no matter what. And I feel so blessed and lucky to have had her, to have her in my life. She's got me through things that she doesn't even she doesn't even know about. She's so important to me. I had a pretty happy childhood. I really did. I don't remember much of it. I remember pieces, like mementos, just little fragments. I don't know if that's how it is for everyone, but I mean, I remember things from when I was 2 years old. I remember Disney and all that, and very vivid imagery. But these pictures are disjointed, and it's hard to really track down where they're from. Um, then I've always had daddy issues. I'll be fairly honest. My relationship with my biological father is not great. In fact, at this point in time, it's non-existent. Um, to go off on a tangent, I in my journey through depression and all these issues, I've met tons of kids who've had similar issues. Um, I remember I was in a group therapy session, and the therapist that was leading the discussion asked how many of the kids had father issues or issues with their dad or hated their dads. Every single guy in the session raised their hand. That was something that stuck with me and astounded me because I was like, that can't be that can't be a reason. Because me personally, most of my issues, they don't come from my biological father or my daddy issues. I've gone past that. I've dealt with that in my own way. But just to see that every single other person out there who had these issues, who, well, had gotten to the point where I was at, um, had father's issues, like that was crazy to me. Um, I know personally, if I'm ever a father, and I hope I will be one day, I'm gonna be there for my kid, and I don't ever want to be cited as a reason for depression or anything like that. Um, but that's just a tangent. Like I said, that probably set me off on a path, but I don't think it was the root cause or any type of reason. Um, I got past that. So even though he was a part of my life, my biological father, who wasn't, I didn't consider him to be part of my childhood. Um, that of course that's changed with the viewpoint of the future. Over time, your memories shift, and things that were important to you then lose importance. Looking back in hindsight, I don't consider him to have been there for me. I don't. consider any of that to be the reason why I went through what I did. Um, I was I was a happy kid. I smiled a lot, and I always had this very strong ambition, this feeling inside of me, this burning desire that I wanted to make people happy. I wanted to make people smile. That's what I wanted to live for. Those feelings, I wanted to be a doctor at first. Well, I mean, I didn't want to be an archaeologist at first, but my first burning calling as I wanted to be a doctor because I wanted to help people. I wanted to save people. I want to save as many people as I could, make people happy. That I remember figuring out that that's what I wanted to do, and I remember how happy I felt. That burning desire, and I was like, I know why I'm here. I know what I want to do with my life. This is what I want to do. That ambition, unfortunately, I think that is what led to my downfall. Because all that potential, all that desire, it's great, and it's a great motivation, and it's great to have that. Unfortunately for me, my grandmother got sick when I was a kid. Um, my grandmother was very special to me. Uh, she was like a second mother. I lived with my grandparents and my mom, and she was always there for me. I have very clear memories of her, and she'd sneak into my room after bedtime. We'd play dinosaurs and blocks, and I spent all this time with her. And she was such an amazing person. She was so beautiful in the way she lived, and she meant so much to me. Um, Unfortunately, she was diagnosed with cancer when I was young. Um, I think I don't even remember how young anymore. I was probably like 8 years old. Um, I know it was around that time. She got very sick, and the worst part was that it didn't she didn't die right away. Um, no, she was sick for years, and watching her be sick and going through all that, I think that's definitely where my PTSD comes from, and it took me forever to realize that. Um, but being such an optimistic kid who wanted to save everyone, and then being forcibly taught the hard way that there's some things that you don't have control over, that you can't save everyone, and the world isn't some fairy tale or some book where you can write yourself a happy ending. Sometimes these horrible things happen and you don't have any control over it. You never know how much time you have with the people you love. You don't. They could be gone the next day. And learning that as a kid and, and watching my grandmother die, it broke something inside of me. Um, I think personally, I think I would have probably gotten depression anyways. I think that because, like I said, that's just something that is the way my brain's wired. But that was probably what triggered it for me. Um, I remember my final goodbye with my grandmother. That's one of the most vivid memories I have in my head. I remember seeing her, and she was about an hour away from death, and it's not pretty or packaged in a bow like it is in the movies or books. It was real and vivid, and seeing someone like that, someone who I cared so much about, I I lost it. I felt like it was pointless. Like everything I was hoping for and aspiring towards didn't really matter. And I felt like for the longest time, I felt like I couldn't express these feelings. Um, I felt at the time that I had to be strong because I know my mom was suffering, and my sister Amber, I knew she needed me to be there. I needed to be the big brother. I need to be strong, and I needed to be there. And that's bullshit. It is because when you go through something like that, you can't be expected to stay strong. It happens. Um, Obviously, you can't let it control your life when things like this happen. You have to find a way to move past it. but you have to deal with it. You can't just package it down and decide that you're going to deal with it later, because that's when things destroy you. You can't let it overwhelm your life, but you can't forget about it. You have to deal with it. You don't have to be strong for anyone. You don't. You never have to be strong for anyone. You have to be yourself. You're the most important person in your life. You can't let anyone else's feelings override your own. Uh, when you deal with trauma, everyone deals with it differently, and when you deal with things like that, you deal with it by yourself. Other people can help, I'm sure. Been helped by other people, but at the end of the day, the way you get better, the way that you get past anything, you do it. You deal with it. You're the one who makes that final push, and you get there. So the whole idea of being strong for someone else, it's an oxymoron. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. It just makes you suffer. So don't do that. Be honest. Tell the people who you care about what you're dealing with, and deal with it. That's the only way to get past it, to get through anything. Unfortunately, that's not the route I chose. I buried it down. Even as a kid, I remember I buried it. I buried it deep, to the point where I kind of forgot about it. I didn't. When I was diagnosed with PTSD, I was like, no, there's no way. I definitely don't have that. I mean, I know I have depression, but I don't have PTSD. That's ridiculous. For the longest time, it haunted me because I couldn't think of a reason. I had all these symptoms, but there was no reason for it for me. I thought that it was ridiculous. I had to be a false diagnosis. Um, and it wasn't until after a year or so of self-examination that I realized that I had these strong feelings for something that I thought I had dealt with, but I never dealt with it. I never dealt with that feeling of helplessness and lack of control, of feeling abandoned, and like I couldn't save the people closest to me. Those feelings are what manifested themselves as my PTSD and as my biggest doubt. And I separate PTSD from depression because they're linked, but they're just separate things in my head. When I am suffering from my PTSD and I'm having my panic attacks, it's a very different feeling from when I'm laying in bed and I'm depressed and I have those dark thoughts. Um, so that was where my PTSD came from, and that's something I didn't realize for the longest time. Years passed. Um, my depression had started. Even then, as a kid, it started manifesting itself. First, it manifested itself as fear. I was afraid of everything. That might have been my PTSD. I'm sure it was a mix, but I couldn't sleep at night. Um, I stayed up and I was so scared. I was so scared, and I didn't even know why. I would lay awake at night, and I remember one time my mom took me to a therapist to try and get myself through this because I couldn't sleep at night, and I was just so scared, and I'm sure she was terrified having a child that was just so scared and he couldn't say why. And the therapist had me draw the monsters I saw, as a coping mechanism to try and get over them. The thing is, I didn't see any monsters. So I made something up because I was like, "Oh, is this what was expected of me? Is this what I'm supposed to be dealing with?" So I made it up and I drew some weird monster that I had never seen before or never dreamt of, and I crumpled it up, and then I was supposed to be over it, and that's not what happened. I didn't get over that fear for a long time. In fact, I don't remember why I finally got over it. Um, I remember the last time I felt afraid. And I remember my dad, my real dad, my stepdad. He's Anytime you hear me talking about my dad, that's who I'm talking about because he's the one who's there for me in my life. Um, and this is probably my most important moment with him. I remember he took me to the stairwell and he had a conversation with me. I don't remember what he said. I really don't. I don't remember. But that sense of him opening up to me, and I know that he opened up to me. After that, I wasn't afraid anymore. Um, I got over those fears. Um, and that was an important moment to me. That was very important. My depression, however, started up differently. The way my depression manifested for me, it manifested as this deep-rooted apathy. For anyone who doesn't know, apathy is the feeling of not feeling. I closed myself off to all these emotions, and it was probably a side effect of me not dealing with my trauma and not dealing with anything. Um, but it was the worst feeling in the world. I felt empty all the time. I felt like I felt like a carcass that was walking around with a mask on my face, a Matthew mask, and I was pretending to the entire world that I was this person who I wasn't anymore. I felt nothing, and I felt like I had to fake everything because I still had to live this normal life, but I wasn't the one driving anymore. I was just strapped along for the ride, and I went through all the movements I was expected to make. I said all the things I was expected to say, but I wasn't really there anymore. That's what depression was for me when it was at its worst. And instead of talking to someone about it, about these feelings, I wrote them off as if that they were the way I was supposed to feel, as if this is something I was just dealing with, and I let it snowball. Um, Unfortunately, I did act on them. I took these feelings of nothingness and I did horrible things. I I began this sequence of events of activities, of self-destructive activities, things that I knew were wrong, that were self-destructive and destructive to everyone around me. And I used people, I manipulated them, I talked, I lied. I was a compulsive liar. I said all these things, and I had felt no recourse, or I didn't think about any consequence to my actions because it didn't matter to me. Nothing mattered to me. I could say whatever I wanted, and nothing would be any different because I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to. I didn't want to be alive. I didn't care about anyone or anything, myself included. I care now, and thinking back over these years and those things I did, and it really got back bad when I was 15. 15 to 17, those 2 years, I destroyed my life. I lied to everyone who was close to me. I used people. I did things that hurt myself. I hurt myself not just physically, but mentally, and I was just so obsessed with feeling something. I thought that if I did this, if I tried hard enough, if I slept with this person or that person, then I would feel something, and I didn't feel anything meaningful. I Even if I kidded myself and I said I felt something, it wasn't really what I was supposed to feel. I just felt like I was giving myself away, and I was driving myself into this shape of a person that wasn't me, that didn't belong. And I'm someone who I think that there are lines in your head. There are certain lines that you don't cross, and once you cross them, it's very hard, if not impossible, to go back to the way you were beforehand. One of those lines is self-injury. If you injure yourself, I think you break something in your head, and it makes it very hard to cope and go back to a state where you are healthy and like a healthy brain that doesn't think anything of hurting themselves. Like they wouldn't think about it because it's programmed in our head, self-preservation, not to do that. That it's a very taboo thought. Um, I I I injured myself in the past. I did. I thought that I had to in order to feel something. It didn't work. I didn't do it much because it didn't do what I thought it would for me. But even just doing that, I started to throw away the idea of myself as a person, as a human being, and I decided that I was a monster. I was some faceless void, this piece of flesh was going through my day to day, and I wanted to run away. I wanted to I didn't see. I wanted to kill myself. I did. I was suicidal, but I didn't want to hurt my mom or my little sisters. At the point I had all my little sisters. I have three little sisters, and I don't know where I'd be without them because they were the driving force for me to kept me away from suicide. I fantasized every night when I was depressed about running away someplace where they never find my body and they never know what happened to me. And that's no better than suicide because it still hurts them the same. They know what, like they don't even know what happens. It's even worse because they're left wondering. And so obviously I wouldn't do that. I fantasized about it, but I didn't do it. And if you're ever fantasizing about suicide or anything like that, then something's wrong and you need to talk to someone. It doesn't matter if you think you're all right, if you think you're past everything. If you're fantasizing about that, something's wrong and you need to get help. I wish I wish so much that I had gotten help at any point during the time I was depressed. I let it get to the point where I have so many things now that I personally have to deal with every day that getting back to the state where I'm able to manage it all is so much harder than it would have been if I had just gotten help just once, just said one thing when I started getting depressed, but I didn't. And I just pushed everything aside. I pushed everything down and it exploded. It exploded. That's that's what happened. That's where my story ends. That's where I finally got my help. I got to a point where I couldn't deal with it. I I met a girl. Um, I got into a very bad relationship with her. It wasn't a well thought out relationship. It wasn't something that someone who was thinking clearly would have done. She had a boyfriend. Um, I didn't care. I didn't. I used her. I lied to her. Um, but she got me sober in multiple ways, and she's the one who pushed me to reach out and get help. And for that, I thank her. There are tons of other things for which I will not thank her, but for that at least I will thank her. Um, I remember thinking that if when I finally told my mom that I had depression, I was dealing with all these things, and I was so good at hiding it beforehand that I don't think she had any idea, and I'm sure she felt betrayed, and I think that's a normal feeling because I lied to her several times. I kept this all hidden, and I don't know why. The thought of telling my mom had never crossed my mind, and it was so easy to tell her when I did finally tell her. It was the hardest thing up until it, but when I told her, when I started talking about it, it was just so easy. And I waited to the point where I felt like I had all this noise inside my head, and it was like it was gonna explode, like these drums inside my head, this all this noise, and I couldn't get it to stop. And I wasn't sleeping. I never slept because I had horrible dreams, night terrors. I couldn't sleep, and I had driven myself into a corner, and I needed help. I didn't care how I needed it, and so my mom took me to the general practitioner. And I'm going to be frank with you, very honest. If you're dealing with all this, you need to go see a psychologist. You need to go see a psychiatrist. I was at a point where I needed medication to get myself back on track, to be able to manage all these things, to get myself to a point where I could manage all these things. Because at the point I was at that time, I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't even begin to claw my way out of a hole I had dug myself. Unfortunately, I went to the general practitioner, and they're not trained specifically to deal with psychiatrics. They aren't. That's not their job. Psychiatrist's job is that. General practitioners are great. I wanted to be a general practitioner. Unfortunately, she didn't manage it right, and she diagnosed me and all that, and she prescribed me some medication that she thought would help. And I'm sure that it made perfect sense to her. Unfortunately, I had a very adverse side effect to this medication. I told her that I suffered from severe apathy, and I didn't feel anything, and it was pretty true. I felt this emptiness, but, I mean, I felt emotions, but they didn't feel right. They weren't mine, they were dulled, and, I took this medication, and I started feeling emotions again. I started feeling every single emotion that I had kept down. I felt it all at once, and I felt it at 10 times intensity, and I went crazy for about 2 weeks because I was on this medication, and I felt everything all at once. I would be walking down the hallways of my school, and I would hear everyone talking. I'd try and cover my ears and try and blot it out, but everything would be so loud, and all of these senses, the sensory input would be so much that I felt like I was gonna explode. I felt like there was something inside me screaming inside my head, and I felt guilt and anger and sadness and all these feelings that I had been burying down, and I felt them all at once, and I remember one time I had a panic attack, and I don't suffer from anxiety, fortunately. I know many people who do. I had an anxiety attack, um, 7 of them within the 2 weeks I was on this medication. They are the scariest shit. I remember I was so consumed by it. I completely forgot. I blacked out, and I was running, and I remember at one point I was screaming at a wall, and then I was huddled down in a corner, and I was crying, and I felt all these things that I had tried to shut down, and then there was screaming inside my head, and I couldn't control myself. I was shaking, I was stuttering, I couldn't talk, and that was so scary. So finally, I decided, and I didn't make this decision lightly. First, I had to decide whether I was gonna try and get better because it wasn't working, and I was dealing with all this stuff. I still wanted to kill myself. I did. I didn't wanna live this life. I wanted to get away from it all. The final decision I made, I remember I was sitting on my bed, and I had a handful of pills in one hand, and I was thinking, "I need to decide now whether I wanna live or if I wanna die." Um, and I thought about my little sisters, and I thought about my grandmother and when she died and what that did to me, and I thought about my little sisters again and how much I loved them and how much I wanted to be there for them, all the things I wanted to do with them, their lives, and how I wanted to be a part of that. And I couldn't take that away from them. I had to be there for them. So I put back the pills, and I decided that I had to do whatever it took. I was gonna live. I had to live. I had to be the best version of myself. I had to be better for them. I've wasted so much time, and I had to make myself better for them. I had to live. So I signed myself into this mental institution, this hospital. That was the scariest decision of my life. I didn't know what to expect going into it. I didn't know what was gonna happen. I remember I was riding in the ambulance into the hospital, and I was so scared. I was leaving everything that I had ever known. But I had to get better. I had to. It wasn't a decision after that. After I made that choice, it didn't matter what I had to do. I could have had to walk on hot coals. I would have done it. I had to do everything. 'Cause if I was gonna live, there was no half-assing it. I would do everything I had to in order to get there. There was no second guessing it. So this was just something I had to do. So I did it. I signed myself into that hospital, and let me tell you, our system for mental illness, it is in need of reform. That place was hell. It wasn't great. I was fine because I was at least coherent, and I was able to I was at a point where I knew what I had to do, and I was doing it. There was other kids in there, and I was in a juvenile place because I was still a kid at the time. the orderlies treated them like symptoms, not like people. They couldn't fend for themselves, and they were in there, and I don't know if any of them got the help they needed. I reached out, the resources were there somewhere, and I got the help I needed. I needed a place for me. I didn't wanna hurt anyone, and I felt like I was on the when I was on the wrong medication, that I was acting out, and I didn't control the thoughts in my brain. So I wanted a safe place where I could try different medications and talk about my issues and get to a point where I was stable. And I wanted to do that in the safest environment possible. So this place served that purpose for me. So as much as it has haunted me in the years since I left that place, I don't regret going there. It's what I needed. I don't know if I'm just telling myself that or what, but what's important to me. It's what I decided. That's what I needed, and I needed it. So it did help. And I got out of there, and things changed for me. It didn't change all at once. That's a big myth. When people with depression, I know I was this way. They're told that there's a medication out there, and they're expecting some magical pill. It's gonna make everything better for them, and there isn't any such pill. Nothing like that exists. There's no easy fix. There's no getting over things just like that. The medicine helps. You get to a place where you can get better, but it doesn't make you better. I've never found any medicine that just makes you better. There's no such thing as a big victory. There isn't. It's fun to imagine that there is, but there isn't. The way that I got myself better, and it took me years, is I just took every small victory I could. I Once I got out of that place, I was at a point where found a medication that made me feel stable. I still had all these doubts and depression was still there in my head, but I felt stable. And I fell apart right after I got out because I was like, okay, this is great, but my life still feels empty. I don't have any real friends because I pushed everyone who was close to me away. I didn't open up to anyone, and I felt so alone. And I still had all these problems, and I was like, "Is this what feeling better is supposed to be?" Because it doesn't feel good at all. And I almost fell apart and relapsed right there. And I can only imagine how hard it is for people out there who expect that they're getting better and then they don't. The truth is, you have to make yourself better. And it is so much work. It is harder than anything that you could imagine. You have to decide to make yourself better every single day when you wake up, every time you go to sleep at night. I fell into this mantra of any day that I don't improve myself, even if it's just a little, even if it's just sitting down and doing something productive, or telling myself that this is worth it, this life is worth it, even if it's something little like that. Any day that I don't improve myself is a day wasted. And I kept on improving my life. I made meaningful relationships, and it didn't happen all at once. I just didn't know how to make a relationship, so it failed several times. But I had to do something. I had to make my life the best possible life I could. I had to be the best version of myself that I could be. So I worked hard to be the me that I wanted to be every single day. I'm still working hard. I'm not perfect. I still have a horrible coping mechanisms. I have all these doubts, but my depression I can manage. And I know when it rears its ugly head inside my mind that it's just the depression talking, and I'm fine with it. I can push it back and I can rationalize it. Um, and that didn't happen overnight. I put in all that work. I still put in all that work. And it gets easier. It does. It gets so much easier if you just keep doing it. But making that decision to do it and making that decision every single day, it's tiring and it's exhausting. But you have to do it. It's Your life is so much worth. It's worth so much. Even when you think it's worthless, it's worth so much. That potential, just reaching out there and getting better, it feels so good. It feels so good and it's so worth it. I've done things I never thought I would do. I've climbed mountains, I've met beautiful people. I've lost beautiful people. It's been so worth it. Every single day I'm alive, and there's no greater meaning to me. I never thought I would get here. I never thought that I would be able to do any of the things that I've done, but I did. Just having that knowledge, just looking back and realizing that you did it, that's worth all the torment, all the pain. You can do it. Anyone can do it. I was in a place where I was lost. I felt like I was the worst human being alive, but I did it. Anyone could. Anyone can do it. Doesn't matter what your circumstances are, where they put you in your life. And there's shitty circumstances out there. This world sucks. It does. But you can make it worthwhile. You can find beauty in anything. You can find meaning in anything. You have to. That's how you live your life. And this is quite possibly the only life we have to live. Who knows what happens when it's over? I don't. I don't presume to. But I'm going to make this life worthwhile. I'm going to find meaning in it. I'm going to do everything I can. I'm not going to give up. And I don't think anyone should. And it's hard. It's hard. I'm not going to lie. It's very hard. But you're not alone. No one's alone. I don't really know. I Sorry, I got a little bit intense there. It's hard to talk about. Um, I hope that listening to my story and some of the things I've gone through, I hope it helps. And even if you don't have depression or anything, even if you don't know anyone with depression, I think listening to other people's stories is important. I think that knowing the value of your life is important. And every life out there has value. I don't think it matters what you've done. All that matters is what you do. The value of your life isn't something that you can change. No matter what mistakes you've made in the past, you're still worth it. You're still worth the effort it takes to get yourself better. You're still worth all of it. You can change. Anyone can change, and it's not easy. It's not. That's why you don't see people change all overnight. It's something you have to continually put effort into, and it's hard, but you can do it. Anyone can do it. You just have to do it. And I hope that you can. I hope that I hope everyone can live a life that they're proud of. I hope they can be a person they're proud of. It's something that you have to work towards. I think that that's the number one purpose of our lives. I'm not one for religion, but that's what religion's all about, isn't it? Isn't that what faith's all about? Is finding out how you can be better, how you can be a person that you're proud of. It's something that each of us struggles with, and something that each of us has to find on their own. I hope we can get there. I'm just repeating myself at this point, so I'm gonna wrap up this episode. I don't know how frequently I'm gonna do these, but I'm going to try and do it more often because I think it's important that we talk about things like this. And I don't know very many people out there who are. And I think it's about time that we all talk about things like this. Not exactly what I said or being so open, because like I said, that's not something that everyone can do. But just talking about the issues that we face in this world, because there are so many real issues that we face that we just ignore. I think it's important that we get them out in the open and we discuss them because they're not insurmountable. Nothing out there is insurmountable. We can get past anything, we can get through anything. But the only way we're going to do that is if we talk about it. No matter how hard, no matter how unpleasant the truth might be, it needs to be discussed. So that's what I'm going to do. And I hope that you'll join me on future episodes, and I hope that if you're going through a hard time, that it helps. You have a beautiful life. Don't waste it.